Welcome everyone to another edition of TAFU's Talks, where we bring together young people to discuss and promote personal responsibility towards nature. My name is Nika and I'm your host for today. For those of you who are new to our program, TAFU stands for Teens and Friends United Nature Conservation Organization. Our mission is to unite young individuals from around the world to actively protect and maintain the natural world, while also promoting personal responsibility towards the environment. Today, we are honored to have with us Ms. Sue Sayre, the founder, director, and chair of Cornish Seal Group Research Trust. She is a highly respected and accomplished conservationist known for her dedication and commitment to protecting marine life, specifically seals and their habitat. Her work has been recognized by His Majesty King Charles. Sue has been awarded an MBE for her outstanding contributions to conservation. We are thrilled to have Sue with us today to share her insights and experiences, and we look forward to learning more about her work and the challenges she has faced in her efforts to preserve and protect marine life, including the story of Septimus, a seal that Sue and her team have been closely studying. We also have the pleasure of welcoming Robert Wells, a member of CSGRT, who plays an important role in the story of Septimus and named him due to his unique white marking of his septum, the area between his nostrils, Septimus Wight. Our final guest for the night is Martyn Ridgley, a wildlife conservationist and zoo biologist who will be taking Septimus to the Isle of Wight for an exhibition at Wight Biodiversity Carisbrooke Priory. I would like to ask our guests to introduce themselves and share more about their work and achievements for those of you who may not be familiar with them or their enormous contributions to conservation.
Hi Nika, I'm Sue and that was a very lovely introduction, well done. I'm passionate about seals. I didn't know anything about them in 1999 and now I seem to know quite a lot about them, but that's because I've spent a long time looking at them and studying them. I love them to bits, and along the way I've met some amazing people, two of which are also on the call tonight, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So over to Rob.
Hello, I'm Rob Wells. I am a retired person living in Cornwall, and I was looking around for things to get interested in, having been interested in wildlife for many, many years, and I got into seals. Perhaps interesting to note that I have absolutely no qualifications in biology or life science at all, although I suspect when I was in the Boy Scout Cubs, age 7, I did get my nature badge. So I think that's my only qualification, but like Sue, I've learned a lot by doing it. So get in there, join in, and it's surprising what you learn. Over to our third person.
Hello there. My name's Martyn and I am from Carisbrooke Priory on the Isle of Wight and Wight Biodiversity. I'm a conservation biologist and zoo. Sorry. Yes, please. Sorry about that, guys. I'm a wildlife conservationist and zoo biologist by trade, and I've worked for over 25 years in zoological gardens and various conservation projects around the UK. That's me.
Okay, I guess we can start the presentation then. Thank you very much.
I will start to share my screen. You need to make me a co-host, Nika, please.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, all done. Okay, here we go. So this talk is about Septimus, and you will discover all about him. He is actually hiding behind me at the minute, but more of that later. So welcome to the talk about Septimus. It's the story of the life, the death, and the immortality of a real grey seal who lived in Cornwall and perhaps beyond. For us at the Seal Research Trust, every seal counts, and our unique selling point is that we do photo ID of every seal's different fur patterns. This enables us to track their individual habits, their movements, and learn a little bit more about their personalities. We are a charity, and our patron is Gillian Burke, who works on the Spring Watch and Winter Watch. And if I know the name of the seal, I have actually written it on the right-hand side of the screen. So This is Fairy Girl. The middle seal is Shadow Puppet, and the seal on the right is Tulip. I happen to have seen Shadow Puppet in the last week, and she looks just as beautiful now as she did in that photo. But the seal on the right is quite special, Tulip, because she is known to have adopted a pup after a big storm, having presumably lost hers. She adopted a stranded pup that had lost its mother and managed to successfully bring it up. So these are the sorts of bits of information that you can pick up if you can photo identify a seal. I'm not going to spend long on this because the data feels very old indeed, and new data for 2022 will be out soon, but basically we do a lot. We do approximately, or in 2021, we did approximately 14 surveys every day of the year. We took over just under 250,000 photos to get over 13,000 individual seal IDs. 7 of the seals that I first met in the year 2000 were still around. Sadly, we had 134 entangled animals and saw lots of disturbance, with almost 1,500 seals seriously disturbed in 282 events. But the key thing is we were able to share these bits of information with over 13,000 different people. And I'm delighted to say that in 2022, we've doubled that figure, which is really excellent. Some of that is down to Nika. Thank you, Nika. We always thank our funders because whilst we're a tiny charity, we can't recruit, train, look after and keep happy our amazing team of volunteers without paid rangers. So thanks to all our funders. And over to Rob, who is going to start the story of Septimus off.
Hello. This photograph here is taken at Mevergizy, which is a coastal village, coastal fishing port where I live. And the Septimus story for me began here because I was standing round about where I took this picture on a different day. I looked down and there was a big seal floating just to the right of the pier there. I went down and looked at it. It's a big male grey seal, and I knew about the seal group's photo ID project. I didn't belong to the seal group then, although I was noting down whenever I saw a seal, just for my own interest. But I knew that it was important to know what the seal looked like. So I scampered down, had a good look at it, very close to the wall, and there were very few markings. It had a white bit on its nose and a scar on its hip, and that was it. The rest of it was plain grey. And I didn't have my camera, I didn't have a notebook. So I walked home saying, big seal, he's got a scar on his hip and his septum, the bit between the nostrils, is white. By the time I got home, I was calling him Septimus Wight, and remembering he had a scar on his nostril. And I got in touch with the seal group, talked to Sue. I thought that was it. Maybe I wouldn't see the seal again. But then I went to a seal group meeting or two, and this chap here, Danny the Pirate, he had actually photographed a seal 2 days before and about 3 or 4 miles away. And this particular seal, you can see he's got a scar on his hip and a little bit of white on his nose. So that was the first sighting of Septimus. And I continued going to seal group meetings and photographed this seal one day, and I didn't realise that it was the Septimus seal. Septimus was sort of disappearing in the memory. We'd forgotten about him. Sue didn't remember either. So this one was called Triangular Back Scar, number 50. And I continued taking pictures, and this shows what can build up from such an encounter. The star in the middle there, in the middle of all those dots, that's where I live, and the coloured dots around it are where seals that I have photographed have also been seen. So you can see a red dot high up off the coast of Pembrokeshire. That was a female that I'd seen. There's one over on the right at Portland Bill, another female that I'd seen. Lots more seals around Cornwall and Devon and the Isles of Scilly. And there's also one right at the bottom in Brittany. So you can, if you regularly photograph the seals, you can build up a picture of where they are, you share your photos, and the seal group has got a fabulous database on that. One day, however, I found this dead seal, and I am a volunteer in the Strandings network. We go out when something washes up dead and we find out what we can about it. So I went, I found this one. I measured it with my trouser belt because I didn't have a proper tape measure with me. And I took photos, and it was a big, big seal. I later found out third biggest ever measured in Cornwall. He was fresh, had blood coming out of his nose and eyes and mouth. And Sue soon realized from looking at the photos of the dead seal, the live one on the rock, and Septimus, hearing about him from me, that this was all one seal. Septimus had been seen by me, seen by Danny, died on the beach. And there are some of the markings showing it was actually the same seal. Next, please, Sue. It was very fresh. Septimus was very fresh. He'd actually died that morning. He'd struggled through the waves and beached and died. We wanted to have a post-mortem, but he was too big to take away. So James Barnett, a veterinary pathologist, he came along and did an in situ post-mortem. We weren't allowed to actually open Septimus up, so it had to be just superficial. He found that Septimus was a healthy male seal, very good teeth, not really old, the teeth weren't worn down, and he also saw the blood coming out of his nose, eyes and mouth, and like me, he thought must have been a blow, a trauma to the head. And yeah, Septimus there, Septimus was no more. Septimus stayed on the beach, he didn't wash away, and he wasn't taken away, so I visited him regularly and took photographs to try and this was at Sue's bidding, Sue's idea that it'd be nice to get photos. So there we are, just like on the television programs, the decomposition of the seal over 100 days. And then we thought it'd been quite nice to get his skeleton. There's a black-backed gull scavenging. And eventually it seemed just to be a skin and bones. So we thought, we'll have that. It's another of Sue's ideas. We'll have that as a specimen. So we gathered together and we came along to carry Septimus away, but sadly, he was a bit bigger than we thought. He wasn't just skin and bones on the surface. There was a lot of stinky, smelly, maggoty, wormy, semi-liquid, horrible Septimus sunk into the sand. But we persevered. We managed to roll him onto a tarpaulin. We carried him off the beach, and in the right-hand picture there, it was quite moving, really, because in the distance, two of Septimus's chums were watching us take Septimus away. We shoved him into Sue's car. There he is being put into a body bag, shoved him into Sue's car, and Sue had a very smelly ride home. She came to us for tea, and then she had a ride home. Talking of smelly things, I've got quite a tradition of monitoring smelly things on the beach. These pictures show top left, a basking shark, bottom left is another basking shark, bottom right is a sowerbiz beaked whale, top right is a common dolphin. So I built up a bit of a catalogue of decomposing animals in case it's ever useful. Next, please. Over to Sue.
I see that Rob is blaming me for the experience so far, but as you can see, he does have a little bit of a history with weird dead things as well. Okay, so I had Septimus in the back of my car and I was driving home and I was panicking because Septimus smelt rather badly. There was a lot more of him than we expected, and I had no idea what I was going to do with him. The plan had been to put him in a plasterer's bath with some enzymes from clothes washing liquid to get rid of the flesh, but there was far too much flesh for me to be able to do that. And I don't have a garden. So I thought, what are my options? And my options seemed to be very limited, possibly handing myself into the police, because if I'd gone to a beach and dumped a body bag on the beach, people could quite easily have misunderstood what I was up to. So I thought, at least if I go and explain to the police that I do have a dead seal in a bag, what they want me to do with it, then I might be all right. And then in the back of my mind, I have a friend called Caroline, who I hadn't spoken to for years, but I knew she didn't mind having dead things on her freeholding. So I rang up Caroline. Now, Caroline is not great at answering her phone, and I didn't expect to be able to get through to her. So I thought I needed to leave a tempting message. So I rang her up and said, "Hello, Caroline, it's Sue. I'm in a bit of bother. I really could do with some of your help. Can you call me back?" To my utter shock and amazement, Caroline's car was on my drive in 4 minutes, because serendipity had it that she had just stopped working 4 minutes away from me and was just about to head home and thought she'd stop in at Sue's place on the way. As soon as she got out of her car, she said, "It's a seal, isn't it, Sue?" And I went, "Yes. How do you know?" And she said, "I can smell it." So Caroline then kindly agreed to take Septimus to her small holding. So he went in my car and I followed her, and we put him in this fenced area. We chicken wired him down so that nothing could get in and nothing could get out, and we left him for 2 years. After a few months, you can see that he'd started to get overgrown because he was nourishing nettles. And by the time we went to him 2 years later, Rob and I, we could barely see where he was buried. Fortunately, Caroline had a way of cutting all this growth back quickly. And before we knew it, here was the skeleton. And my first thought was, probably Rob's as well, oh dear, we've left him too long. However, it didn't deter us, and we got as much as we possibly could organised in different containers out of the ground, and then we took him home to my terrace in front of my house. Well, you may be able to see there's a road right next to the terrace, and unfortunately on that particular day my neighbours took it upon themselves to have a wedding in the church at the top of the hill. So all the neighbours came past and every single one said, "What are you doing?" And I then had to explain I got a dead seal on the terrace and we were trying to clean it up. This is what we ended up with: boxes of bones. I left them to dry, and then we wondered what on earth to do with them. So I contacted a friend of ours at the Natural History Museum via Kate, who is one of our trustees, and he recommended somebody to send the bones to. Over to Rob.
Okay, but this was up in London. So we happened to have a student friend called Billy, and he was heading up for Christmas to his parents. So here is Marion, one of our rangers then, handing over parts of Septimus to Billy, and Billy took them up to London to our sealery builder, whose name I've forgotten, Sue. What was he called, Sue?
He was called Derek Frampton.
He was called Derek, and he still is called Derek Frampton. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to request, Martyn, could you turn your mute? Can you mute yourself? Is that all right?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Yes, Derek Frampton, Rob.
Derek Frampton. He had worked for the Natural History Museum, and now he was working alone as a consultant and a private individual. Here is Billy in Derek's study and handing over Septimus's skull. And I think in the next picture, you'll see that Derek's office was full of the most wonderful exhibits. He's got birds from the UK and from all over the world. And even towards bottom left, there's a great auk. And those of you who study birds will know that the great auk is extinct. But he knows so much about birds and has such skill that he actually makes great auks from a plaster cast of a great auk bill, which he then makes resin likenesses of, and feathers from modern bird casualties. I think he uses razor bill quite a lot for the great auks because it's got the black and white. And so he recreates great auks. He recreates dodos too, and so on. And Derek because he's so good at creature bodies, he was called upon by the film studio when they were making the Harry Potter films, and he devised the moving skeletons upon which the dragons were built for various of the films of Harry Potter. Derek knew what he was doing, and in no time he had Septimus's bones sorted out and grouped ready. And then each group of bones he made into a little subsection. And he did this often by drilling through each bone, putting a piece of wire through, and there are some of the subsections. There's the rib cage, there's the rear flippers, there's the chest and neck, and so on. And he put them all together, and finally he came up with Septimus. We made the job easy for him because we wanted Septimus in 3 parts, so that we could actually take him to different places and he wouldn't be too difficult to get in and out of vehicles and in and out of doorways. And here we are. There's Derek handing over Septimus to me, pointing out some of the things about the skeleton. He hadn't done a grey seal before, so he'd enjoyed doing it. And we were able to then, after a long chat and a guided tour, we were able then to take Septimus out, put him back in my car, put him into my car, he'd not been in before, and take him back to Cornwall.
I just wondered if you were going to mention these, Rob.
I certainly can. Those upon the top of the garage door there, those are rhino horns. And Derek was employed by the museums of Great Britain to make resin casts of the horns of rhinoceroses. The reason was because thieves, burglars, were breaking into museums, sawing the horns off specimens, of rhinoceros skeletons and specimens, and then selling them, because in the Far East, rhino horn is greatly prized as a medicine. So he made plaster casts of all the 5 species of rhino and replaced everything in collections with plastic ones. And to his great delight, after that, one of the museums was broken into and his horn was stolen off the specimen. So he did such a good job, the thieves even stole one of his horns without realizing it. So he's a clever chap. We had lost some finger bones because the seal is a mammal and it's got hands and feet rather like us. So some of the finger bones had gone missing, but Derek quickly used the ones we had, and he made plaster casts of them and cast some new ones in resin so that Septimus has a full set of digits, hands and toes, fingers and toes, but some of them are a little bit yellower. You might notice when it's on exhibition on the Isle of Wight, if you look carefully at the fingers and toes, 1 or 2 of them a bit yellower, they're the false ones. But he did a smashing job. There we are, heading out towards my car with the head section, head and neck, popping them in my car. My car's an Octavia. And Octavia and Septimus are 2 nice old Roman names. That was quite fun to have the 2 Roman names together. On the way home, I was saying to Sue that it was a shame that we'd not got any really good photos of the skeleton because there was so much in the background. So we hatched a plan and we took Septimus. When we got to my home for a cup of tea, we took him down to the beach where he died and took some glamour photos of Septimus with a nice natural background. And you'll see he is a fabulous specimen. Absolutely wonderful. There he is against the sky. And you can see he looks a bit like a bounding animal, related to bears and otters and so on. So seals were mammals that went back into the water and then continued to evolve in there. So back to Sue.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, so we've studied his skeleton. Before we got him back, Derek phoned me. He'd been quite hard to get hold of, but he phoned me out of the blue and he said, oh, this seal's got some interesting pathology. And I said, go on, not even quite sure what pathology meant. It's been a bit of a steep learning curve, all of this. And he said, well, he'd been hit really hard, so hard that it had bent the strongest bone in his body, which is the sacrum at the base of the spine. It had bent his sacrum. So we weren't quite sure why. He thought potentially a boat strike, because it would have had to have hit with such a force. And I went, well, I'm not surprised, because he had a big scar on one of his thighs. And presumably that's where he was hit. And that's at the time that this damage was done, bending his sacrum. That was probably one of the earliest of his injuries. However, there were several others. The jury's out about why this happened, but can you see here that there are 2 broken vertebrae? There's a close-up here. One of them has started to heal over and one is still quite open. So one was pre-mortem and one was post-mortem. Nevertheless, we could speculate about why this had happened. You know, it was definitely a different incident to the bent sacrum, because the timing was different. You know, got bashed somehow, perhaps while he was still alive. Well, presumably while he was still alive. At the post-mortem on the beach, James Barnett had said that he had a toe infection, and this is what a toe infection looks like: bobbly bones, basically. That's what your bone does to grow and to re-heal over infection. And all his big toes and thumbs were similarly calloused and traumatized. But it may be that thumbs and toes that happens to naturally, but this is certainly not. He'd obviously got a nasty infection in his toe. The cause of death was postulated as being as a result of a sinus infection, and his cheekbone actually had a hole in it. The bone is very thin on that side, which is also potentially attributable to the sinus infection, and it had eaten part of his cheekbone away. This is likely to have been the cause of death, and it's possible that the infection here had transmitted itself to his brain, in which case he might not have been particularly with it as he died. Part of me kind of hopes not. Also, quite surprisingly, he had 2 broken ribs. Now, ribs are usually smooth all the way down the shaft, and these 2 ribs clearly have spaces between them and massive growths in between as well. Derek said he actually had to superglue these ribs together because they were completely separate. Unfortunately, with a seal, unlike us, if we stay still long enough, our ribs will heal. But with a seal, their chest cavity and their ribs collapse under pressure when they're diving to feed. And also they haul horizontally across land. Well, if we did that with broken ribs, we'd be in a right state. So effectively what happens is this is approximately 2 years worth of attempted healing and re-breaking, attempted healing and re-breaking. But the biggest surprise of the lot for us was this gunshot pellet. So Septimus had also been shot. The bullet had fused into the bone, and Rob will explain a little bit more about this later. It would have been a long time ago. And yeah, more of this later. We needed some forensic analysis in order to assess the bullet, but there was no doubt that the bullet was there. So this is why Derek had been so surprised by the pathology of the skeleton. And this is not, most of this is not something that would necessarily have come up in a post-mortem. It's the sort of thing that you only get when you actually get the bones cleaned and isolated. So to sum up then, he had cumulative impacts from his sacrum and his spine, which had been deformed as a result of that. He had 2 broken vertebrae processes, one possibly as a result of trauma, 2 broken ribs, possibly as a result of falling from a height or being bashed in a storm. Disturbance, if you tombstone as a seal from a height into the sea, one of the most likely things that you're going to break is a rib or your jaw. So that's a possibility. Toe infection, sinus infection, and he'd been non-lethally shot a long time ago. These are all cumulative impacts. So we were left thinking, do all seals suffer like Septimus, or do we just get lucky to get an unlucky seal? Over to you, Rob.
So we set about trying to find out a bit more about these injuries, and particularly this gunshot. This picture shows a horizontal, very dark green, looks black, stick, which is the path that the pellet would have had to come if it had been shot and finished up on that rib immediately. And you can see it would have had to come right through the whole seal, through all of the organs, and it would have caused a lot of damage. So, and it's a long way. A little pellet like that would not have had the energy to go the length of the body. So the pellet maybe didn't start there and maybe got shifted round. One of our vet friends told us of a cat he'd had once that had been shot, and he didn't find the bullet or pellet and sewed the wound up. And many months later, the owner came back with the cat with a funny lump in a different place, which he opened up and found the bullet. And the bullet had moved about inside the cat. And it's happened also with soldiers coming back with shrapnel in them, moves about. So that was okay. These compasses are because I wanted to know whether the pellet or bullet was steel or lead, because you're supposed to use steel shot when you're shooting coastally and marshes and things. And so I got a compass, and in the middle is a compass, and the red end is pointing upwards and the pellet is over to the right. The red end of the compass is not interested in that pellet at all. But when I tried it near another part,
Sorry,
no,
Rob.
that seems we've lost. Perhaps is the other picture underneath?
No, it's not, Rob. Sorry, it's not
Yeah.
there.
Anyway, we tried it against one of the metal pins holding Septimus together, and the compass moved. It twitched towards it. So we were showing that that was a lead pellet that had probably come in from the side, shifted around. But we also wondered, I wonder how that pellet is shaped. Is it spherical? Is it a bit longer? An idea I had was to go and see my dentist. I've got a lovely dentist who is really helpful and kind, and she's great. So I said, do you think you could help me in a special way? And she raised an eyebrow, and I said, can I bring a dead seal for you to X-ray with the dental X-ray to see whether a bullet actually penetrates the bone, whether it's long and thin out of sight, or whether it's spherical, so we know a bit more about it, or is it an air rifle pellet with that little skirt round the back? So I took Septimus in one Saturday morning when my dentist was on emergency call and it was quiet. I sneaked Septimus in the back door into the dentist chair, got some X-rays, and I think the next picture will show, there we are. That's a slightly distorted sphere. It's round. It's not bullet shaped. It's a little bit flattened, and you can see there how it's been there a long, long time. The bone is growing round it. So we'd learnt that the bone, it had been there a long time ago, spherical, lead shot. There must have been a lot more in Septimus's body at one time. And we have said many times we ought to go back with a metal detector, but to where we buried Septimus in Caroline's Field, but we haven't done yet. So that's the story of Septimus. He's since been on all sorts of travels. Over to Sue.
Okay, so we did a sort of crowdfunder in order to raise the money to get Septimus articulated by Derek, because he'd done a lot of skeleton articulations for the Natural History Museum. So he was the top person to do it. And all these people contributed towards putting the skeleton together. We're delighted that he survived despite everything we threw at him rather. Hopefully he will now outlive all of us. That's the plan. Septimus, Rob decided, I think, that he was very keen to get a book about Septimus. Do you want to talk about this, Rob?
Yes, I was rather proud of myself that I'd managed to keep a photo record of everything that happened to Septimus during our time that the story was developing. And so it seemed a good idea to actually have this written down and printed and reproduced. And so one of our rangers at that time, called Emily, She had done some graphic design. She'd been like many of us and changed direction a little bit already, even though she was quite young. And so she put together a booklet with our photographs, a lot of my photographs, some Sue's too, and stuff that I'd written down and so on. I also got to thinking that Septimus was, we think, around about 10 maybe when we first met him, maybe 8, maybe 12, but he was fully grown, mature male, and he'd had an interesting first 10 years that we knew nothing about. But things must have happened to him during those 10 years to finish up with all the damage that was on him. So with Emily's help, we created the early years of Septimus from when he was born, various things happening to him, lots of anthropomorphic, that means human influenced events that would finish up with all his injuries. And we finished up with a nice little booklet that we take along and we regularly sell to people who hear about him. Here we are with Septimus in the museum at Mevagissey, where I live. School children came each day to have a little talk, to do some exercises, some activities that Sue and Emily and the other rangers had put together. And it was quite good taking him to Mevagissey because it's a fishing port. Some of the older fishermen don't like seals. So we were able to influence the children, get the children on our side, and in the long run, we will win the battle and promote the conservation. Here are children doing some of the exercises on the floor, having a lot of fun. And I remember the general public was still coming through the museum at the time. And I apologized to one couple. I said, sorry, we've got these children everywhere. You'll have to step a bit carefully. And they said, oh, it's not a problem. It's wonderful to see the museum so alive. These children loving what they're doing. They're probably learning quite a lot without realizing it. So the adults were on our side. Back to Sue.
Okay, so Septimus has got quite a lot of attention. This was a university exercise for the Natural History Photography group at our Falmouth University. Normally, the marine students there would photograph a motorbike because lighting a motorbike is extremely challenging, but it's a marine course. So they were very excited to have the possibility of trying the difficult challenge of lighting a skeleton and creating some really awesome images of him really well lit. So this is a beautiful example of one of their photos. We also managed to get some close-up photos of the skeleton, which are surprisingly artistic and wonderful. And yeah, we had a really great time at the university, so that worked very well. We also have a virtual reality experience of Septimus and Augusta, which was created by Rose Summers, who did the 3D scan of Septimus when she was a student at the University of Falmouth. And I'm delighted to say that prior COVID, this was the first time that the virtual reality glass goggles were used, and they were used by this little boy. And what was utterly remarkable, and another beautiful bit of serendipity, was his name was Ruin. And when his dad told me what his name was, I looked and smiled and thought, oh, that's a nice name. And he said, you don't know what Ruin means, do you? And I said, no, it's, turns out, Cornish for seal. So the first boy to actually watch our virtual reality experience of our skeletons was a young lad called Ruin, called Seal. How amazing is that? Septimus has also been on Springwatch with Gillian Burke when they looked at his skeleton in one of their episodes. However, Septimus is no longer alone. He has some company in my lounge. You can see on the left there is a much smaller skeleton next to him. We also do have some other skulls here. This is John Pethick, who was very, very brave, and I'll explain why in a minute, along with Ken Wallace, who is an ex-dentist, a retired dentist, who was fascinated to do a really close examination of seal teeth and Septimus's teeth. So meet Augusta. Augusta was a 3-day-old pup. Augusta was a 3-day-old pup who unfortunately died, probably never got fed by her mother. And yeah, we managed to get her. We did bury her in my grounds at home and lifted her a year later. And she then also went off to Derek Frampton in order to be re-articulated. And then Rob and I went up to collect her along with John Pethick. Why John was very brave was he was the gentleman who, along with us, exhumed Augusta from my property, and then he took the mush home into his loft, and he spent several days going like this with 2 metal objects in the mush. And if he felt something hard, he knew it was a bone, and he collected the bone and extracted it from the mush. And if not, he left it behind. And now we have this utterly beautiful, utterly delicate, so many lessons to learn, 3-day-old pup skeleton in order to compare her to Septimus. So quite a contrast. As we mentioned earlier, Septimus had experienced cumulative impacts, as all our seals do. So I'm just going to take you through some of them. So from the top left, grey seals live in the wild Atlantic Ocean. That is a huge set of waves with a tiny seal in it. The thing that I can never quite get my head around is the fact that seals have no control over this environment at all, unlike us as humans who have quite a lot of control, many of us anyway, over our environment. Seals have none. The only option they have is, if they don't like the environment they're in, is to move. I find that quite hard to get my head around. A new impact that we have discovered in 2022 has been this: heavy hail on a seal haul out. And the next 2 photos show the impact that this particular hailstorm that lasted 6 minutes had on part of the haul out beach. Every dot is a seal before the hailstorm, and this is what the beach looked like after the hailstorm. So in 6 minutes, we actually lost 272 seals in the biggest stampede we have ever witnessed, and all down to potentially climate-induced hailstorms. The photo on the right shows a seal in a hammering rain event. So extreme weather events are things that are happening more frequently because of climate change. Hammering rain is happening more frequently in Cornwall and leading to flooding. But if you're a seal with an extremely sensitive muzzle, seal whiskers are one of the most sensitive whiskers, if not the most sensitive whisker of all mammals, and therefore hammering rain on their faces must be possibly even more painful than it is on our faces. And when I took this photo on that particular day, I was like this, hiding next to a wall for the first rainstorm. And when I returned, I discovered that half the seals had gone into the water. So when the second hammering rainstorm came, I stayed to watch. And in total, 37 out of 70 seals had actually been disturbed into the sea as a result of 2 hammering rain events. Also increasing as a result of climate change have been rock falls. So in 2019, on this particular beach, we had 1 rock fall. 2020, we had 1 rock fall. 2021, we had 4 rock falls. And 2022, hot off the press, you're the first to hear it, we had 8 rock falls. So rock falls are getting more regular on the seal haul out beach. And this graph shows the impact of 1 rock fall on another seal, key seal haul out in March. The rock fall happened in March, and the blue line shows the average haul out numbers on that site for 3 or 4 years, and the orange line shows what happened in 2022. Basically, the seals didn't use that habitat for 3 months, potentially because of that rockfall. Unfortunately, human disturbance, we're recreationally and commercially around the coast a lot more than we used to be because of increasing access and increasing technology to get there. This is a pregnant adult female who is about to tombstone from a height into the sea. That's potentially a life-threatening event for her pup, if not for her, and that's the sort of thing that could have broken 2 of Septimus's ribs. Seals also stampede into the sea if they're seriously disturbed by a loud noise or by seeing us if we get too close, and they injure themselves as they go over rocks and stampede. And I know what to look for. I look for blood trails afterwards, and I know that seals get injured in stampedes. Dogs off leads. Seals are ancestrally related to cats, dogs, otters and bears, as Rob said. And unfortunately, sometimes owners think that they can control their dog, but when it's super excited by a new smell of a seal, very often even the best dogs don't come back to their owners when called. And this is very unfortunate. This dog scared all the seals off the haul out and unfortunately bit the last one that was slowest to escape from it across the beach. All of that are things that we can do something about. We can also do something about this. This is bycatch, accidental caught in an operational net off a local inshore fishery in Cornwall. That's very unfortunate. Fishers never want to do this, but it is something that happens accidentally. And we've had 6 dead seals in an inshore sustainable fishery in one net, and 38 by-caught seals on a very big commercial, probably not sustainable offshore trawler from Cornwall. Unfortunately, as a result of climate change, the phenology, i.e. the timing of seasons, is changing in Cornwall, and the peak haul-out numbers have moved back from moved back from April into December, and the mackerel fishery has moved later. And now we have a spatial and temporal overlap. And if you could look carefully, you can see that this molted pup, only a few weeks old, has now got multiple hooks in it as a result of being caught up in a mackerel line. This is something we can easily do something about. This is a toy. It's a flying ring. We often call them frisbees. It's got a hole in the middle. It's a flying disc. If only we used flying solid discs instead of rings, this wouldn't happen. But anything looped in the marine environment is a potential risk to seals. Seals will play to learn. Young seals in particular. This is a few-month-old pup, and it's seen a little bit of net in the sea that looks like kelp, and they love playing with kelp. They swim round it, under it, over it, and sadly through it. And once they're through it, they're caught. And this is the long-term impact of one of those hideous injuries, most likely in monofilament stuff as opposed to trawl net. But this is an adult female called Legs. And she did have a pup in 2022, which is great news. So how do we get to this point? Well, it's all massive thanks to all of our volunteer citizen scientists who cover South Wales all the way through to Hampshire. They make these incredible discoveries possible. They don't do all of these necessarily, although some of them do, like Rob. They're eyes and ears out watching their patch and reporting any changes. They survey, they process photos, they make and confirm IDs, they digitize the data, so sit and do spreadsheets basically to get the data into our databases. They'll help us analyze data. Some of our volunteers even write reports, some fundraise for us, and all of them are ambassadors and champions for seals, as indeed you will now be because you've heard the talk. We're on all the social media platforms, probably apart from TikTok, so you can find out lots about us, particularly on our YouTube channel, which has got shed loads of resources in terms of talks and videos and films. So do check us out. If you want to learn more about seals, we have 2 Field Studies Council courses that are online learning, and the beginner one, which is Discovering UK Seals, ran twice last year for 100 people, and I'm just about to finish writing the 2nd level course, which is called Seal Field Skills to Inform Conservation. So if you're interested, you can Google that on the Field Studies Council website. We fund our work. We do get grants to fund our work, but they're very stressful to get. So we are now trying a different tack to be independently funded ourselves through our online shop, through a wild seal supporter and adoption pack, and through donations and fundraising. So please do have a look at our website and support us. We would love to hear your feedback on this talk. So we will send Nika the link so that she can share it with you. And we do have a film about Septimus if you wish to hear it, but we could stop there. So I'm going to defer to Nika and find out if she would like to watch the film or whether we're out of time, really. It's about 7 minutes, Nika.
I think it'll be nice to watch as long as the sound comes through.
Okay, so let's give it a go. We'll try. Helps if it works, doesn't it? Here we go. You can tell me if the sound is going to work, Nika.
Okay.
It's not every day that you find a dead seal drag it halfway across Cornwall, bury it for 2 years. But that is just part of Septimus's bonkers story.
It was on this beach in April 2015 that I was looking around for wildlife, particularly seals, and came across a dead seal. It was a large male dead seal, and it had blood coming out of its eyes and nose and mouth, so it looked as if it had been bashed by something. It was enormous, and I didn't have my strandings gear because I'm a strandings volunteer for the Cornwall Wildlife Trust, so I measured it with my trouser belt, took lots of photos. I did have my camera with me, and from those photos we realized that the seal was Septimus, a seal that we knew already, that I'd photographed along this stretch of coast. And Septimus then wasn't removed from the beach. Normally the beach owner will remove it, but it didn't happen here. So I monitored Septimus, watched him, photographed him for 100 days while he decomposed, and then Sue decided it was the best chance we'd ever have of getting a complete seal skeleton. So we took Septimus away in order to let him decompose fully away from holidaymakers. It was July by the time we were doing this. The beach had holidaymakers on it. Children were throwing stones at poor Septimus's remains. So we took him away, and the story continued from there.
So we decided that we would get Septimus off the beach, and we arranged everybody to be in the right place at the right time, and then we got to Septimus, and we had a bit of a shock because there was rather more of him left than we hoped. He had a lot of flesh still attached, and he kind of sunk into the shingle, and he smelt hideous. Nevertheless, we decided we would carry on with the plan. We would body bag him up, we would put him in a stretcher, and we would remove him from the beach and take him away to a secret location where we would leave him to decompose. At which point we needed to have some private land, a safe place for Septimus to rest for a couple of years. And he went on to a friend's freeholding. We herded him off and we chicken wired him down so nothing could get in and nothing could get out. And there he spent the next 2 years nourishing nettles. There was a beautifully high patch of nettles when we returned 2 years later to cut down and remove his bones. We were delighted that we got pretty much his entire skeleton. We subsequently found out later that we might have missed a few bones from his right foreflipper, but pretty much got all of his skeleton, which was fantastic. And then we cleaned his bones and we sanitised his bones, and then we left his bones to dry. At which point we thought, what are we going to do next? So Kate Hockley had met Richard Sabin from the Natural History Museum, and we contacted him. He's the curator of mammals at the Natural History Museum in London, and he suggested that we contact Eric Frampton, who is a very skillful reconstructor of animal skeletons. He'd never done a grey seal before, so he was quite excited. He'd never done a grey seal skeleton in sections, which is specifically what we needed to do so we could take him on tour and take him around to different events in Cornwall and the southwest and over to Devon. So Derek made the skeleton. It took him a few months to do so, and now we have him. So Rob and I drove up to London to go and collect Septimus, brought him back in pieces in the car, and then we brought him home to this beach where he'd lived and died, so that we can have this amazing story of this incredible individual animal. He was 2.4 metres long. He was the third longest dead seal to wash up in Cornwall. He's totally awesome and spectacular. And incredibly, Septimus has an amazing story to tell that only his bones could reveal. It shows what a resilient species these animals are, that they can survive, some of them, despite the hideous things that we and nature throw at them. They're resilient, but we worry a little bit about where threats would eventually tip the balance for the species because they're already suffering a lot at our hands and at the hands of nature. And now Septimus is a completely world unique resource, a seal, huge grey seal, 2.4 metres, third longest dead in Cornwall, that had a life story, a decomp story, and now a death into immortality story. And yeah, he's a fantastic resource that's going to engage a whole new audience to grey seals, Cornwall speciality, globally rare species.
Septimus's skeleton is starting to tell an incredible story. It's clear that he sustained loads of injuries through his life, including boat strike and even being shot at. Sadly, these are only some of the things that grey seals encounter out in the wild. Human disturbance on their haul-out sites, entanglement with lost fishing gear, and of course, like many marine creatures, they also encounter plastic pollution. The Cornwall Seal Group Research Trust is working hard to tell Septimus's story as they continue to investigate his skeleton. And of course, by doing so, they're going to be able to tell the story of all grey seals and protect them for the future.
Okay, Nika. So that was one of the films. We do have two other short films. Oh, it's not that one. We do have other two short films. They're going to be about another 5 minutes together, but they are quite entertaining, of Septimus going to Lundy.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so that's one of them. And this is the final one. So this is Septimus coming back from Lundy, which was really rather different. Was it not, Rob? You can tell that was not professional filmmaking. That was done by us, so not quite the same. So yes, we've had a wonderful experience. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. We've had an utterly wonderful experience with Septimus. The story continues because now Septimus is going to his next exhibition in the Isle of Wight with Martyn, which is extremely exciting. And of course, if you're interested, we do also have clothing, Septimus clothing. This is the Septimus Surreal t-shirt, and we actually have a real version of, like, a proper photo of his skeleton as well on t-shirts. So if anyone's interested, head to the online shop clothing section. But thank you ever so much, Nika, for the invite to speak. I hope that has lived up to your expectations, because you've actually met Septimus, haven't you?
Yeah, it was amazing. And he seems to have a very exciting life and afterlife.
Definitely true.
I've got a few questions, if that's okay.
Of course.
Well, I don't know which one to start with now. Let's go with this one. You mentioned at one point that I forgot the name now, but when they jump off cliffs, because
Tombstone, yes.
Yeah. But how do they get so high? When did?
That's a very good question. Very good question. So seals get high at a high tide. So effectively, they will float out. They are actually capable of climbing up surprisingly steep slopes as well, as you've probably seen in one of your previous talks from us. But basically, they can float out at high tide. And then in Cornwall, we have a very big tidal range. So the tide can sometimes go out 6 or 7 meters. So they can then be 6 or 7 meters above the water. If they fall asleep, the tide goes out. They will ideally wait until the tide comes back up to refloat off, but sometimes we get there first and then scare them into jumping off, which is what the tombstone is.
Sounds horrible. My next question was, like, the boat strike that you mentioned. How would that have affected Septimus's life at the time?
It's a very good question. Do you want to answer that, Rob?
Yes, well, as Sue mentioned, we think that Septimus had this raging sinus infection, which was probably causing him not to sleep very well, to be not really with it, to have lots of pain. So he may well not have noticed a boat coming and been bashed by that. And that would link with the blood coming out of his eye, nose and mouth when I found him, and when James came to post-mortem him. There wasn't a fresh break of a bone that would have, broken neck or something, but that may just have finished him off. He may well, he had infections in all his flippers, and with his sinus infection, he may well have been so run down that one bash could well have knocked him out. But he did struggle up the beach because James found sand and debris down inside his mouth and throat, and that only happens if they are gasping as they come up the beach rather than just floating in with their mouth closed. So a boat strike could have finished him off. Who knows?
It's also possible that he had a boat strike a while back as well, isn't it, Rob? And that's why he had the pink scar on his thigh and the bent sacrum. That could have been from a boat strike as well. Although equally, this is speculation. It could also have been when he was very small, big storm, bashed on a rock. We really will never know. But
yeah,
you know, the chances
a falling rock from a cliff fall.
Yeah.
We don't know.
No.
Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button. Whichever one it is, it sounds horrible again. You also mentioned his infections. Like, do you know of a possible cause why that would happen so severely?
I think probably all of us get infections, and none of us are always clear about why we get infections. They live in an environment where potentially there is a lot of infection, and they come up on beaches where there's all sorts of things that have gone out of our toilets that are possibly infected appear. You know, infections are natural for all beings. What we're very lucky to have here in the UK in particular is a National Health Service, but all of us have access to medical care, hopefully, wherever you are, you do anyway. And, you know, seals don't. So they have to rely on what we had to rely on for hundreds of years, hundreds of thousands of years, is an immune system.
Yeah.
And their immune system is very good at fighting most infections. Unfortunately, sometimes, as you know, with humans, infections take over and get out of control.
Yeah. Also the gunshot wound that you mentioned, you said it was a long time ago. Do you know how long approximately? How many years? And if so, how do you know?
We don't know. We don't know. We could see the bone has grown round it, and therefore we're looking at years, we suspect, for the bone to grow around this irritant. So we haven't a clue. We haven't a clue how long ago, but it was amazing that the bone grew around it and remained as evidence that the shooting had happened. And we really must go back with the metal detector and see if there were any more pellets that fell into the soil from his tissues and muscle and so on. But yeah, we just don't know.
No, there have to have been lots of other pellets, because in one shotgun cartridge, Nika, hopefully you don't know this, but there can be between 30 and 70 pellets in one shotgun cartridge. And if they're shot at close range, which is probably what needed to happen for Septimus, for the bullet to even go through, the shotgun pellet to even go through seal skin, which is extremely strong, it would have had to be close range. And the chances are the number of pellets would have hit his body in about that size. And when Martyn sees the boxes and the posters that we have on the side of the boxes, you can see in one of the photos that Septimus had a kind of scarry patch on one side of his body, which we initially just put down to being lying on a beach for a long time dead. But in actual fact, when we looked closely, they were scars. And the chances are those are scars where the shotgun pellets would have entered and healed. But I've subsequently managed to get a photograph. Rob alluded that vets often see animals with shotgun pellets in their bodies. And one of our volunteers actually had a dog who had shotgun wounds, and they were being x-rayed for something else. And when they were x-rayed, they discovered lots of pellets inside this dog's body. And it's really quite shocking. You know, people taking pot shots for target practice or fun at animals is something that your generation just won't understand. I don't understand it, but you know, it's a thing that hopefully is becoming less and less popular, because it's cruel and leads to suffering and huge welfare issues. Yeah. Shall I introduce you to Septimus? Do you want to see him?
Definitely.
I couldn't bring all of him up, obviously. I nearly forgot he was here, to be fair. But this is Septimus's front end, as you can see. I don't know if it'll work on Zoom very well, but this is his skull. You can see the wound in his skull up the top where his sinus infection ate it away a little bit. But his anatomy is fascinating. When compared to Augusta's as well, he has sticky out bits called processes on his bones that Augusta just doesn't have. At the back of the head, there are two big processes here that have been pulled out by strong muscles. So bone is living thing, and when put under tension, it will stretch and then grow in behind to fill the gaps. So he's got processes here. This is the, have to remember, it's alphabetical order. So this is the atlas and the axis bone. This is where a lot of his strong muscle attachments would have been. And if you look at Augusta, she doesn't have a process on her axis at all. And then obviously these are all the vertebrae. And what's really shocking is Augusta's vertebrae were all completely different because they were unfused because she was only 3 days old. But you can see how big he is in comparison to the size of my head. You can see what a big creature he is. And when most children see it, Rob, what do they think when most children meet Septimus?
Dinosaur.
Dinosaur.
Sure, it's a dinosaur.
Yes.
Does look like
Put
one.
it down because I don't want to drop him.
Yeah.
Martyn might be very pleased with me if I drop him. Martyn, do you have any questions? Comments? You're on mute. Hang on, Martyn, you're on mute. Need to unmute. All right, don't worry.
He's fallen asleep.
Actually, Nika, you might be able to prompt him to unmute.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah, well done.
Had a few problems. No, but the one thing I would really like to say is this is really exciting for us down at Wight Biodiversity, because we get to discuss so many factors that we have looming over us when it comes to conservation, not just marine, but also terrestrial as well. And it's the bottom line of how technology now is becoming that great that we can start to investigate wildlife crime. But unless people see it, they don't understand it's happening. So this is just amazing. The fact that you guys have put this together, the fact that you've worked so hard at it, it's mind-blowing. I'm not going to lie, it's absolutely mind-blowing. And I'm so excited. Said my piece.
Yes, Martyn's picking him up on Saturday, so you don't have long to wait, Martyn.
I know. I've literally, everyone's so excited. And where we're a little holiday island as well, we get so many people coming over. So the fact that it's going to inspire people to listen, inspire people to get involved in the trust, hopefully as well. And not only that, it's also going to help with the kind of things that Nika's after as well. And people are going to start getting more involved. And that's ultimately what we all want. So it's looking good. I'm so excited.
Excellent. That's a relief. Although, frankly, Rob, Septimus doesn't disappoint, does he?
No, certainly not. People love him. And Martyn, of course, we've got our seals have been photographed as far east as Portland Bill. So we're looking forward to you and your volunteers sending us photographs from seals around the Isle of Wight for us to identify and push the range of our Cornwall seals a bit further east. That'd be something really exciting.
It is. It's brilliant. Just the fact that we can give you guys some data as well is just brilliant as far as I'm concerned. Absolutely brilliant.
Looks like we're all happy then, Nika.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a question for Martyn, actually. In the exhibition, will Septimus be able to be touched, or will he be like behind glass or something?
No, Septimus will not be allowed to be touched. We're going to put him inside a perspex box with adequate light. Oh my God, I can't talk. Sorry, adequate lighting as well. He can be spun around so people can see him, but we don't agree with people touching things A, that we don't own, and B, that are delicate. It's just something we won't do, I'm afraid. But we will have quite a few other things on show as well. So we will have cut out cardboard versions of skeletons that people can put together. And also for us, it's more of a visual aid of getting people to look over the skeleton, take all the information down and let them have their own kind of, if you will, forensic 10, 15 minutes with it to see what they can see just visually. And then go over it with the information that the Seal Trust has already given us so that we can then look at it and work forward from there.
Sounds amazing. Wow.
Thank you.
When you sent it to, I forgot his name, but
Derek.
person, to articulate it, how much did it cost?
Oh, now are we allowed to say, Rob, how much it cost? The reason we might be a bit secretive about it is just that as a small charity, there are some people who would question whether spending the amount of money we spent on him was worth it, because at the time it was half what we were paying one of our rangers. I'm going to have to say now, actually, because that sounds like a lot of money anyway. Sounds more than it actually was. Should we say, Rob?
Well, yes, I mean, because we've got so much advertising out of it, we'd have paid more for the advertising, wouldn't we? So
Absolutely, yes. He cost us £5,000. And that was a huge amount of money for us to save up and fundraise for. And when we got Augusta, we kind of went, oh, we've got to find some more money to articulate another skeleton. So we asked Derek for a quote, and she's half the size of Septimus. She's not even that, probably. She's half the size of Septimus. So he charged us half the price and then cursed after he'd finished her, didn't he, Rob? Because she was so intricate and delicate. She was much harder work for him, wasn't she?
yes, each vertebra was in 4 pieces. He had 5 pieces. He had to put them all together first. Well, match up the bits for each vertebra, stick them together, and then make up the whole spine. So he was a busy boy. But as I said, Septimus has been all over. He's been nationally, internationally.
Bristol, hasn't he? He's been to
Sorry?
Bristol. He's been to Bristol so far.
Bristol. He's been to London. He's been all over Devon, Cornwall. Nika has got an international audience, I think.
Absolutely. So yes, he's earned his stripes in terms of conservation reward for us and our spending. It was a little bit of a punt at the time and a bit of a risk for us. That's all, wasn't it, Rob? But the risk has well and truly paid off.
I think so, because he's going to go on, and we've got further ideas for him. Gareth would like to have him for a while, wouldn't he?
Yes, in Wales. He's going to Wales after you, I think, Martyn.
I had another question. Oh yeah, did Septimus having so much shock in his life is from the other skeletons that have been articulated of seals. Is that unusual or is it quite usual amount?
Do you want to answer that, Rob?
Well, we hope Septimus is unusual and he's been a really unlucky guy. We fear that might not be the case, and that he may actually, if he's typical, then we've got mended seals struggling around our coast all the time. The thing is that it's our first skeleton, and we know that the seal group up in the northeast has buried a seal skeleton, and I've not heard whether they've exhumed it yet. Have they too?
I've not heard either, and I haven't.
It's in someone's back garden. They buried it at the dead of night in someone's back garden, and the neighbours didn't notice. It could have been. They could have had the police round, certainly, as Sophie when she had Septimus in her car. So we haven't got many skeleta to compare Septimus with. So if anybody fancies burying one and bringing us a skeleton several years later, we'd love to see it.
Well,
Martyn, challenge on, mate.
oh, that must have been very hard to wait for it, no?
We actually sort of forgot for part of the time, to be honest. We suddenly realized, oh dear, we ought to go and get Septimus. So we were busy.
Did you have like a planned time frame of how long he should stay underground, or just guess?
No, everything we've done has been flying by guesswork, really. Maybe we did leave him a bit longer than we needed to, but it turned out okay.
Yeah, it works very well. So yeah. I'm just looking at my questions if there's any we didn't already answer. Yeah, you said that Septimus was actually a really big seal. What would you so he's bigger than average? So how big would you say he is? I mean, what's the average size of a seal?
He was 2 meters 41 centimeters, which is about 8 feet. And as mentioned before, only 2 have been measured in Cornwall bigger than that. Male seals, 2 meters is not at all big for a grey seal male. 2 meters 20, 2 meters 30. Females are smaller and prettier. Males are often plain. Their markings fade with time. They're still there, but they fade. Sometimes just 1 or 2 marks, white marks remain. Females keep their pretty pattern much longer, and therefore they make life a bit easier for us to identify. I tell people that a female seal weighs about the same as 3 human ladies, maybe a male seal, 3 or 4 human men.
Wow, that is quite big. Had a question. Oh yeah, could you briefly explain like your photo ID process, just briefly?
Yeah, go on, Rob.
Okay, we have around the southwest of England 37 places where volunteers go out on a regular basis and photograph the seals. So these sites are where we know seals turn up, rest, and so on. So we go along and photograph them. Then we organise the photographs to put all the photographs of each particular seal together, and then we try and identify that particular seal on that particular page of the album from that visit where we took the photographs. I think ladies are better at identifying seals than men. Most of our identifiers are actually ladies. Sue, I think, can recognise more seals than people, I reckon. So that's it's a skill. So what we do is we look at the patterns and we see a shape that looks like Mickey Mouse or a banana or a propeller or a rocket or a foot or something. We look for a shape that suggests something and we give that name, give the seal that name. We maybe call it banana rocket because there's a banana shape and a rocket shape. And then that particular person who gave that seal that name has that printed in the brain and looks at that seal again months later and says, look, I recognize that shape. Someone else may have seen that seal somewhere else and taken pictures and may give it a different name. So we finish up with each seal having several names, and sometimes they get one name from the left-hand side, and another time someone sees the right-hand side of that seal and they get a name from the right-hand side. After a while, someone takes pictures where the seal turns round, and then it's realized that one particular seal in the catalogue is the same seal somewhere else. We've just got different sides. So we build up these sightings and resightings and share amongst the group. What happens now is Sue used to be the person who looked at all the photos, but with over 1 million, it's too many. So whenever each area, each hub, each site, whenever they get a new seal, they share the pictures of that new seal with the other sites and say, has anyone seen this seal before? And other sites say, oh yes, she comes here every autumn. Or we saw her once. And so we can put together the sightings and link up. And we couldn't have done this 10, 15 years ago. It's data. It's digital photos. It's technology has made it all possible.
Yeah.
Well, when you see like a whole bunch of seals on a beach like we saw, do you check all of them or do you choose some to check?
So we take photos of every single one on the beach, Nika, and then we shove them all in an album, and then we spend probably 8 to 10 hours looking at them at home, trying to match them to ones in the catalogue. And we can't match all of them. We probably managed to identify at most 30 to 35%. At some sites, they're up to 80 to 85%. Rob's site, they have a higher proportion of identifications than the site that you visited. And yeah, then we try to identify as many as we can, and we add new ones to the catalogue, which, as Rob said, we then share with everyone else. So yeah, it's a big job and it never stops. But there's some interesting changes going on, probably all climate related, but we don't know that. And that's what makes it also interesting. At the last monthly Zoom meeting that we have Seal Southwest sessions on Zoom every month, first Wednesday of every month. Everyone's welcome. But we had a remarkable number of seals, didn't we, Rob, that haven't been seen since 2017 or 2018. And they've suddenly reappeared at the end of 2022. It's like, where have they been? Because they haven't been seen by one of our volunteers round the coast in all that time. So, you know, they're just fascinating, really. And yeah, like where they've been, we don't know, but they obviously follow fish. So maybe they've been in France, or maybe they've been in Wales, or maybe they've been in Ireland. Because Rob, you had a very exciting news, didn't you, in the last couple of weeks about a seal that was rescued and released in Ireland?
Yes, along the coast from me, one of our seal sites that I don't go to quite as much as I used to, because thankfully we have a very, very diligent and skillful and enthusiastic person living there now, which is wonderful. But a seal that she and I have photographed a few times had a blue tag. Now that helps us identify the seals, because when rescue places like the RSPCA in near Taunton in Somerset, or over on the east coast, or the Cornwall Seal Sanctuary, which is down on the south coast of Cornwall, or other places in other countries, when they rescue a seal and feed it and look after it, give it medication, and then are able to release it again, they put a plastic tag on a rear flipper with a number printed on it in quite large black letters. And if the seal is seen again and it conveniently shows us its tag, well, quite often you just see the edge of it and you're left scratching your head. But sometimes they do stretch out, turn over, we get the number. And one seal that we've seen along the coast from here had been rescued in Ireland. And it's great. It's my first link from here to Ireland, which is really good. I can brag about that now. I've got a link to Ireland, but they're delighted that the seal that they rescued and released has been spending so long over here. It's lovely. We've got taggies. One's tagged from Belgium, from Holland, from France, from Devon, Cornwall, Ireland, Wales. I don't think they tagged them in Wales.
We haven't had a tag seal from Wales, but our tag seals have gone to Wales.
Yes, yeah. So
yeah.
that's really good.
Oh wow, it must be very exciting. You just mentioned so many countries, so what's the range of seals? What country sort of range?
We don't know yet. We're still finding out.
Haven't we, Rob? We've been really surprised because we're still finding out. As he said, we've had common seals from Belgium and Holland. In 2022 we had a really exciting find, a seal that was rescued in France and released in Biarritz. Well, Biarritz is on the southern coast it's on the west coast of France, but the southern end of it, just before France hits Spain, so on the border. It's 800 kilometers away, and bless it, that little seal, after it was released, swam 800 kilometers in less than 28 days and was then photographed by swimmers off Mousehole in South Cornwall 28 days later. So, you know, they're utterly incredible creatures, and their range is far bigger than any of us really ever realized, because we go 450 kilometers north, about 350 kilometers east, 800 kilometers south, and 650 kilometers, did I say east? I meant west. 650 kilometers east to Belgium and Holland.
Wow,
big range.
Huge.
But they're not all doing that. That's just some of the big movers.
Mm-hmm. Do you know if there's anything that influences why they do that or when they do that?
Must be food, Nika. It has to be food. Food or instinct to breed, I suspect. Those are the two drivers. We talked about that, didn't we, in one of the previous talks?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah, last talk.
Yes, last talk.
Yeah, I'm just checking again. Oh yeah, you talked about the post-mortem that happened on the beach. So what would be included in the post-mortem?
Right. Well, I've been to more than one. On this particular Septimus one, all that we were allowed to do by the beach owner was to have a good look at it and take a few samples. So James looked it all over, took some skin samples, took a bit of blubber, took a bit of nail claw sample, lots of photographs. That's all we were allowed to do there. Whereas just a mile or two away, where the Sowerby's beaked whale washed up, James came down and he actually cut the whale open in the little cove, and took out the organs, weighed them, measured them. We found a little fetus, a little baby, about 30 centimeters long, was in there. So that female had been pregnant when she died. So he does a full post-mortem, taking samples, taking measurements, taking photographs. And then if it's out in the wild, then it doesn't take long for the scavengers to eat it. And that's the best thing that can happen, really, that all that protein goes back into the marine ecosystem, and some other things thrive. If it's post-mortem that's done in his laboratory, then of course everything has to be disposed of, health and safety, incinerated and so on. But yeah, on a beach, he does as close as possible to a full post-mortem as he can. And he does it all in his spare time as well, which is truly amazing. He gets some expenses and some payment now,
These
but
days, yes.
he's a hero. Yeah.
You had a good story about a common dolphin that died on your local beach just before Christmas one year. It was the one in the top right-hand corner of the photo we showed, didn't you?
I did. It was Christmas Eve, and we were counting the seals at this place where the one from Ireland turned up, just along the coast. And I saw the gulls were interested in something that was in the waves, and watched, and it was a dead thing washing in. So we, Kath is my helper, we struggled down to the beach. It used to be a tourist beach, but the steps have washed away, but there is an old piece of rope. So we scrambled down on the piece of rope and we went across to it, and it was a rather soggy, smelly, dead common dolphin that had washed in. And I photographed it and measured it, but because I'd been on a seal survey, I didn't have my full strandings kit and I didn't have a tag. So it was Christmas Eve and I went back the day after Boxing Day. So we had Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day. The next day I went back and all I could find was the skeleton. The gulls, mostly the black-backed gulls, had eaten the whole thing. In 4 days, they'd eaten a dolphin. And I took photographs and things. I wrote that one up too, like I wrote up Septimus. I called that one Dolphin Christmas Dinner. And the funniest thing was that it had washed into a corner eventually, and it was surrounded by empty cans and bottles in the marine litter. And it looked as though the gulls had had a really good Christmas party and scoffed a dolphin. But yeah, 4 days.
That is, I mean, that must have been a lot of food for all of them.
The ground was flattened by the gulls' feet. It was quite funny. It was quite trampled, like you see when lots of people have been standing on one spot. Yeah, so there we
There
are.
were a lot of gulls as well, weren't there? So
Oh, it's a hungry time. End
Yeah.
of December. They're very hungry, and
Yeah.
they had a good Christmas.
Well, back to postmortem. I wanted just to ask, how do you use the data once you've collected it? How does it get
The
used?
photo ID data or
No, the postmortem data.
post-mortem data? It's a very good question. It all goes off to the Cetacean Strandings Investigation Programme, even the seal stuff, and then it's written up into annual reports, and then it's used to inform the government, particularly because they fund the CSIP project. It goes to the government, who then use it in theory, to help inform marine conservation going forward about some of the risks and issues that the marine life is facing. And that's what we all hope. You know, we all learn absolutely shed loads from it, and it helps us further conservation, but it also helps them further conservation with the government.
Yeah, they look at microbes that they can grow from specimens. They look at heavy metal content in the blubber. So there are lots of long-term studies going on, and that's why Cornwall contributes lots of dead things. We're sticky outy on the coast with lots of coastline and lots of volunteers. So we donate quite a lot of data, and it's really good that ordinary people, unqualified ordinary people, can develop an interest and can do something useful.
Yeah, looks like we need to finish, Nika.
Yeah, better finish here then, so we can do it all together. Yeah, so as we come to the end of our programme, I would like to extend my sincerest gratitude to our esteemed guests, Miss Sarah, Robert Wells and Martyn Ridgley, for sharing their valuable insights and experiences with us, for their passion for conservation and dedication to protecting marine life, specifically seals, has truly been an inspiration to us all. We have learned so much about the importance of protecting marine life and the challenges that conservationists face in their efforts to preserve and protect these magnificent creatures. We have also heard the story of Septimus, a seal that serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of studying and protecting individual animals, and how that can help us to better understand and actually protect entire populations. We have also learned about the important role that zoos and exhibitions can play in conservation efforts and the crucial partnership between conservationists and researchers in the field. We also want to thank our audience for joining us today and for your support of TAFU's talks and our mission to unite young individuals from around the world to actively protect and maintain the natural world, while also promoting personal responsibility towards the environment. We hope you have enjoyed this program and that you will continue to support our mission. Once again, thank you to our guests for sharing their valuable insights and experiences with us, and to all of you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you all in our next episode of TAFU's Talks. Until we meet again, and remember to stay responsible towards the environment. Bye!